What? Sorry, what's your?
Hello, and we're back with Keith John Adams, who I just interrupted in the middle of a question, but we're gonna soldier on, and if it was an important question, he'll let.
I think it may have had to do with who I am. I'm Giles.
John,
Oh,
hello.
Giles. Um,
Gentlemen, I'm very jet lagged, and I've been drinking wine. Oh, look, it's invisible. It won't.
ooh. Oh, there
Oh,
we are.
I've been drinking invisible wine, and so if I seem a little, it could go either way, couldn't it? It could be worse or better for that reason. So, anyway, go ahead, guys.
Well, I have thought Giles doesn't drink, but I have thought of doing a version of the show where everyone is drunk, the interviewer and interviewee. So
Yeah.
this will be maybe a dry run, but we're going to talk
Oh,
about
huh.
Keith John Adams movie Ozma, which is a movie I just like to, it's a two-word pitch, telepathic jellyfish. And that's, you're either in when you hear that or you're out. And we were
I
in, of course.
I got you to do the marketing, Gregory, because that's a good. Yeah, they call that high concept, don't they?
That's
You can
very high.
compress the idea of a telepathic jellyfish. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
go ahead. How would you describe, how do you describe the movie? So,
well, it is. I think it is. You could describe it as telepathic jellyfish with a mixture of. It's about loss as well, of course,
Mhm.
which is woven in there, and it's also got that strong musical element, which is musicians. A lot of them session musicians in London, people from the underground scene in London, who are friends of mine from years of being a musician, are playing in the background, providing a kind of live score
yeah.
for what happens with the actors. The actors mostly, well, ignoring them actually until right at the end. You might have noticed. I don't know. Not many people notice that, but right at the end, our main character does notice a musician. I don't think
Yes.
that's a.
The final musician at the
Mm,
point of climax there, right? Or
yes.
denouement, however you want to.
So
Describe.
I,
Yeah.
I would say, and as I happen to know, the movie won Best Score at the Boston Sci-Fi Film Festival, and I would say the music is maybe, other than telepathic jellyfish, the music is the most memorable and outstanding element. And so, one of my questions was going to be, do you have a musical background, which I assumed was yes, and it seems like it is, but can you describe it in your musical background in more detail?
Well, I've been making music all my life, mostly in sort of quirky independent bands here in London, playing in the UK. I've toured as a kind of solo singer songwriter, Japan, the US several times, Europe many times, and I've actually kind of because I've been involved in making music videos in the past. One of the things that I'd always thought was, wouldn't it be neat to have that musical element in a feature film, have a narrative which was strung together and have almost like, almost music videos, but of course, the narrative would be the stronger element. And actually, when I was editing the film, I discovered that I really couldn't put too much music in because I did have sort of 3 or 4 minute performances, and I found that they did distract and detract from the narrative. So I ended up chopping them down to about a minute each. So hopefully the music doesn't get in the way of the story. Um, but nevertheless, it's a really notable element of the film, of course.
Yeah, I thought it was integrated perfectly. It did not interrupt the narrative flow. It was usually, so there's a concept called diegetic music, which is music that the characters can hear, and most soundtrack music is non-diegetic, that meaning the characters can't actually hear it, which is sort of the case here until, as you say, the end. Except you can see the musicians playing. They were almost was there any point when they were usually superimposed? Was there any point when they were actually in the same room with the actors doing the performance?
No, no, they frequently were actually. Yes, there. I mean, uh, most most of the performances are actually live with the actors there. So, for your audience who won't be aware, but there's a scene, for instance, on a staircase where there is a jazz saxophonist called Terry Edwards, who's quite a notable musician in his own right. He's played with PJ Harvey, and he's done something with Tom Waits in the past, I think. And he is with a friend of mine, Rodri, improvising on the stairs. And I said to them, look, the actor's going to walk past you. I want you to improvise a feeling of anxiety in short bursts of 30 seconds, because at the end of the 30 seconds, there will be a voiceover. So that was a very free-form thing with the actors there. And actually, even when, yeah, you know, also the kitchen scene, I don't know if you remember, there's a cellist and a viola player. They are on the table playing along at the same time. So and there's an element of both. It's not completely one thing or the other. I thought it was quite important for me to have some of the scenes with the musicians in the room, because it was just it was kind of pushing that button for me that they were present. And one thing about the film is it's not entirely clear whether it's a dreamscape or if it's real or if it's in the imagination of my main character Jeff, played by Ferdy. But I thought the musicians added to that sense that we didn't know whether this was a dream or not. And in truth, I don't know whether it's a dream or not. You know, it is ambiguous even to the author of the film.
Giles, do you have a question?
Just thinking, considering even if it's shall we say not a dream, the main character Jeff is established as someone who's kind of fleshing out his own inner mindscape all the time anyway. So he's talking to a woman he knew in his past fairly regularly, and considering the hints that are shown for this guy's interest in sound in general, it would make sense for him to fashion this, music scape to his own self, and as such have the presence of those making that sound. So I think it works even if it's real, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people watching the film would think it perhaps would be incredible to suggest it was real. But I kind of live in an infinite universe where I think everything is happening all at the same time. So for me, I think that's a good point, though. Within what we know of Jeff, it's entirely coherent that could be in his mind. Absolutely.
Sticking with the music for at least one more question. So I was thinking, it's having the musicians playing there, visible but still non-diegetic, was a interesting idea. It seems like something somebody would have come up with before. I could not think of any examples. I mean, the closest thing I could think of is maybe Oh Lucky Man, where they would break away to a scene of, but they were sort of a separate scene, a scene of a guy singing the song.
But I think you have hit a nail on a head there, because I remember seeing that and it having an impact on me. And so that is definitely an influence there. The film Birdman, I don't know if you saw that one-shot movie. It's supposed to be with some hidden. There is a jazz drumming score to that, and occasionally the camera catches the drummer once in the back of the theatre and once on the street, and it ties in. He is actually playing the score as they go past. So that's brilliantly choreographed in that movie, and I love that. And also, I can't remember which Dogma movie it is. One of the I think it's Festen. But if you remember the Scandinavian Dogma movies, the rules were that you could not put incidental music in the films. That was part of their rules that they gave for themselves. And there's one where you can hear a melodica playing in the background. I can't remember if it's The Idiots or Festen, but I remember seeing that film and thinking, I can hear a melodica, would it detract from the film for me if I saw the melodica player? And I thought it wouldn't. So all of these things fed this idea. And the idea to have the music in the film like that was kicking around long before the broader story came to me. And when the idea came to me of Jeff and the jellyfish, and it thought this was something that I thought I could do with my limited resources, then I thought, okay, I'm going to do that thing with the musicians. I'm going to tie in all the musicians. And then when I wrote a list of all the musicians I knew and tried to make it varied, I realized that I could reflect different mindsets of Jeff using those musician friends of mine and their different skills. So everything came together beautifully, as things do, accidentally, you know. Yeah.
Giles.
Yeah, well, it's that was a good two keywords you got there. Limited resources. This is one of a kind of movie I am growing to appreciate more and more, where I see that there is, shall we say, and this is not at all an insult, not a lot of money being,
Yeah.
spigoted across the screen and, saturating this, that, and the other shot with things, but still making something that is very different and very interesting. And in this case, certainly sonically, rather, bordering on unique there. With these limited resources, you have a great little cast that you've assembled. I'm wondering if you might talk about Finding Ferdy, for example, and the two characters I actually found the most interesting were that pair of sort of police style entities. So if you might want to talk about how you got your on-screen non-musician crew together, I'd be very interested in that.
Yes, well, I suppose COVID plays a role here, Giles, because it was the end of 2020 when I was coming up with the project, and the character who plays Joanne is a friend of mine, Gemma, who is an actress who's worked in theatre and various different things, and she was the kind of first follower in that I showed her the script and I said, I really want to do this. And she said, I will do anything I can to help you. And so she helped me get Ferdy, because she had been in a theatre company with him called Filter. Oh. And I'd seen him do Hamlet, actually, years ago. And I thought, if I ever make a film, I want that guy, because he has great presence, Yeah. And he brings such a lot of gravity to my film. I really have to thank him, because he becomes the centre of it, as you'll know from seeing it. And he brings a lot of... his character has got so much stillness and depth to it that I think he really brought out the themes that I wasn't sure that we were going to get there. Mm. Anyway, how COVID comes into this is, of course, these are theatre people who work in the theatre more, who weren't working in the theatre because the theatres were still closed, even though we were coming out of the pandemic. So I had access to Ferdy. I had access to Victoria, who's one of the police officers, mm-hmm. And Jun, who is the Korean guy, who is the other police officer. I found him online as an actor who lived in East London. He didn't live in East London when I contacted him, but these are actors that I don't think I would have got otherwise. And in order to make it work, I paid them a kind of hourly rate, almost like an Uber driver. They were gig economy actors for me, but they wouldn't have done it, I think, if they hadn't have liked the project. I sent them all the script and a storyboard that they really liked. Mm-hmm. So I managed to get these actors. Gemma helped, but it was COVID really that helped. And then because it took 2 years to shoot it over sort of short periods, and I needed to do pickup scenes and extra bits. The second year that I was making it, Ferdy, our Jeff character, had got landed the role of Prospero in The Tempest at Shakespeare's Globe, which is a massive role for him. Yeah. So we went through a year of me sort of calling him and saying, oh, Ferdy, I just need you to come back to East London for 2 days to hold on to the jellyfish and then run down, and then there's the bit with the kite. And then, but it was quite difficult to drag him back, because he had this huge responsibility of carrying this enormous play in Shakespeare's Globe, which is a very iconic theatre,
Right.
obviously, in London. Anyway, I was so lucky though to get that cast, and the good thing for me, I've made short films before, but this is my first feature, and I was spoiled, and I loved it. And working with them, all of the lines that I gave them, they really elevated them, you know.
Mm.
And you may see in the film that I enjoy. There are certain kind of lines which are quite hammy, and you know, all of those notes were there intentionally, and they got it, and we had lots of fun making the film. But yeah, the cast, I was extremely lucky, and who else is in? There's you know, there's also the other person I'd like to say. The first person you see is a Lynn Ruth Miller. She's a comedian. She was in her 80s, and very sadly, she died a couple of months after we made the film, so she never got to see it. But she you know, she's kind of woman in her 80s, came and agreed to give me the great start to the film, because she kind of carries the jellyfish. You can't see it; it's in a cardboard box.
Oh yeah, the introduction abandonment kind of.
Yes, the first scene, and I really wanted someone with some good lines in their face,
Huh.
and she gave me that. So I'd like to mention her as well. God bless you, Lynn. Thank you very much.
And the actress, is it Ava Magyar, did just the voice? So I imagine you were able to. So she just did a voiceover. You were able to schedule her more easily, I would guess.
Yes, we did all that. Actually, we did all of that in one sitting, and she. I wanted. I've got two Hungarian female friends, and I've always liked their voices. So again, I went on the hunt for a Hungarian actress who lived in London, and I found her, Ava. She's been in a few notable. She's been in one of the X-Men movies.
Yeah.
And she's got quite a successful acting career, but she's known in Hungary as a physical actor. If you Google her, Eva Magyar, she's kind of was at the forefront of kind of experimental dance theatre in Budapest. And then, you know, the idea that I give her this voiceover role is slightly ridiculous because she's such a physical actor.
Especially for such a gelatinous role too.
Yes, she can. But anyway, she again brought a real seriousness to it. That, I mean, because the film could veer into comedy quite easily. I mean, it is comedic in many ways, but I love the way that the cast played everything straight, and that was all them really. They really used their guts, read the parts, and then they just treated it very, very seriously. And that was a good lesson for me as a director as well, to trust the cast. Half of the time when we did table reads, I'd sort of say, "Oh, could you try doing that a bit broader? Give me a bit more passion. Give me." And 9 out of 10 times I was wrong, and I had to say to them, "No, stick with what you were originally doing." You know. So, but yeah, the cast. I was blessed, gentlemen. I was blessed.
Speaking of having low means and low budget, I wanted to ask, what was Ozma? And I do not mean where did this jellyfish come from, but the actual prop that you used to represent her. What did you use for that? And what was your?
Yeah, so this is real Ed Wood B movie stuff, you know. I tried different substances. I ended up using a mixture of gelatine and glycerine. Viewers, you can try this at home because these are not toxic. If you mix those two ingredients together, they form a sort of semi-rigid, transparent material. And people use that for making molds, for making candles and such things. And so I found that I experimented, and then I used a huge it's like a fire pit, filled it with materials, and then I was quite involved, you know, and there was lots of experimentation. But in the end, I created a huge jellyfish creature, it weighed a ton, and poor Ferdy was really knackered after carrying this thing around. And then I inserted lights within it that would flash and pulse. And then I also inserted a light in it which was brighter than all the rest, with a push button device that I created, and I would have an actress off screen, not Ava, but another actress who was doing the jellyfish lines with Ferdy as he was acting, and pressing the button to emphasize when the jellyfish was telepathically communicating. Frequently these things fell apart, you know, and so I went through. I probably made about 6 or 7 of them in the end. And then there's also, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say there's a baby jellyfish in it, made of the same stuff. I also did things where I'm spoiling the magic for anyone who hasn't seen the film, hopefully.
Yeah.
I also placed a mechanical device within the jellyfish, operated by a bicycle brake handle, which the actress operating the lights was also squeezing every now and then to give it some movement and life. So it is a real kind of lo-fi effect, that. And I wanted it, you know, the film is obviously riffs on kind of the B-movie aesthetic. And also my memories of black and white Doctor Who episodes where, you know, the effects are practical. And I mean, part of the idea behind the film for me was that I'm interested in how far the audience will go in suspending its disbelief if it's pulled into the story, and whether you know, how much realism needs to be in this kind of cinema. So for me, there's you know, with lots of the props and the things, you can tell that they are very lo-fi DIY props. And I hope that that kind of adds to the charm of the piece rather than takes you out of the story.
Giles, question.
Oh yeah, no, just considering this explanation here with yeah, pushing that envelope, the enforcement weapon of the lady police individual is not quite a baton, but more organic than that.
Yeah. Yes.
Which only, I guess, yeah, not that it necessarily became clear why, but it seemed more fitting when they you had the first scene of those two communicating with their boss, and the means by which they were doing that.
Yeah.
Certainly the premise is striking. The jellyfish is fantastic, but I personally ultimately became more fascinated, yes, as I alluded to before, with those two characters. And I guess I will want to ask if you might elaborate on them, not too much for the sake of, you know, not giving away, you know, story, narrative, and all that, but their inception, because, yeah, jellyfish talking telepathically is weird, but they seem up to something much, much stranger.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I mean, the question one asks is, who are they working for?
Right.
You know, is this a government agency? I mean, you know, I needed villains in the piece, but I also, like you, Giles, I became drawn to them as I was writing them, and particularly the policeman, Jun. He's so put upon by the police woman. She really treats him badly, and you know, there's that old maxim about when you're writing a script that or a story, that you should take your main character, put them in a tree, and throw rocks at them. So it was great to have someone else who was suffering as well as Jeff, you know, and it was great that his suffering goes on a journey ultimately through the film. You know, they are novel. As for their weapon of choice, I mean, part of my decision making there was that I was wondering, what, again, with that suspension of disbelief, do we need violence to be explicit in order for us to think it's violent? And even if it is comedic, is it still not violence? You know, And so I think lots of ideas like that were going around in my mind. But ultimately, I don't think it can be a spoiler. They are cucumbers that they use film. Much like my jellyfish, we went through a lot of cucumbers because when you hit someone with a cucumber, it usually breaks.
Yeah.
So we went through a lot of cucumbers. And there's a scene on the Thames at the end of the film. Part of the joy of low budget filmmaking is shooting things in a guerrilla style without any permits and just enjoying the adventure of that. And when I had the scene towards the end where my two police really attacked my main character with these cucumbers, and the actors were very nervous about this, and I made sure it was the last scene we did. But within about 3 minutes, we heard police sirens wailing, and the two police cars turned up on the Thames and stopped us filming and said, "We've got reports of a fight going on here. What's happening?" And I said to the police, "Well, this gentleman is trying to get a jellyfish to Cleopatra's Needle just over there, and these two police are beating him with cucumbers." and the police just said, "Great, carry on." Had their weapons been bona fide batons, then maybe we wouldn't have got away with that. So in the end, that it was a creative decision, but it ended up having a practical use when the real police turned up on the scene.
There was something very Monty Python-esque about that description.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there is. Look, Terry Gilliam is one of my filmmaking heroes from the Python days, up until his most recent stuff, and there's a Python sensibility probably in this film. I think in there as well. I guess.
But
I mean, all of the silliness of my film, of course, has got this. All of the grief and the loss, and there's a suicidal thing in it, which kind of balances it off, I think. So that's something that hopefully people who watch the film, when I've said to them, "Did you think it was whimsical?" They become quite angry with me because there are a lot of people who've been quite moved by it. So I'm pleased to say that there is a balance to all that B-movie. And the absurdism of it. I suppose I am an absurdist, really. I love absurdism and surrealism, and so that I can't really divorce myself from that when I'm creating anything.
you did also bring in, so you talked a little bit about the locations and shooting without permits, which is something I was going to talk about, but since you mentioned Cleopatra's Needle, it plays an important role in the film. And so I was sort of wondering, did you write that into the script because you knew you wanted to use the location and then kind of reverse engineered it to add it in, or how did that evolve, basically, the use of that location? And it brings about a whole Egyptology subplot.
Yeah. I mean, I've always, so if you live in London, and you every now and then you pass it, and it's not very auspicious, the place it's in. It's on the Thames. It's kind of away from the main tourist drag, so a lot of people wouldn't visit it. And the story of that obelisk. I mean, of course, there are obelisks in New York and Paris, but the story of it coming, I'd already heard that it was brought in this cylinder and that people had died. When I sort of started bringing that together with the jellyfish, the ocean, so lots of storylines came together, and I've always loved visiting that and looking up at it. And actually, when I was researching for the film, which was great, actually, just reading loads about, and I've got a book about all of the needles. These are Egyptian obelisks, which go back to ancient Egypt, and they go back further than Cleopatra. It's called Cleopatra's Needle, but it actually predates Cleopatra by about 1,000 years. And I read in one of the books that it's very likely that Moses would have looked up at that obelisk that you can now look up at in on the Thames. I didn't write it in just because I wanted the location, but I was aware of that certainly when I was writing it in, and I was also aware that because it wasn't in the centre of London, because it was on the periphery by the Thames, that if my film was something that happened overnight, I would be able to film there. I could get away with it. I think if I had have said that the focal point for the jellyfish had been Nelson's Column, which is in Trafalgar Square, or the Houses of Parliament, or one of these other things, which wouldn't have worked in a narrative way, but it also would have presented problems for filming it. So expediency is included in why the Cleopatra's Needle features. But it was also an amazing thing. It's a 3,000-year-old relic tied to all of this ancient belief in these many gods. So it worked in this fantastical way. And it was amazing to me that it hadn't been in other things. I think there was a Marvel thing that came out when I was a year and a half into making the film, and it with lots of Egyptology in it. The Night Moon. Sorry, gentlemen, my wine is preventing me from.
The Moon Knight TV series.
Yeah, TV series. The
Moon Knight, I believe, is
the Moon Knight, which has got lots of Egyptology in it. And I was biting my fingernails watching this thing, thinking, please don't go to Cleopatra's Needle. Thankfully, they didn't go to Cleopatra's Needle, so Cleopatra's Needle is mine. You know, it belongs to my movie.
And of course, with the Egyptian thing, also ties in well with the ultimate fate of the two enforcement officers.
Yes, done. We won't. Let's not go there, Giles. But I'm so glad you picked up on that, because it is, in fact, yes, meaningful. Let's say it's a resonance. Yes.
Okay, we have about 6 minutes left, so we have probably time for maybe one question, then a final question in the last 2 minutes or so. Giles, do you have another question?
Not on deck that hasn't been really well discussed.
How about films shot in black and white, although I think it's a little closer to sepia. It's a little graded, or?
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, because I shot the film in color. I knew I wanted it to be black and white, and when I put it in black and white, it seemed cold. I love monochromatic filmmaking, and I just love it aesthetically. A lot of people have asked, why is it in black and white? And it's almost like they want me to say something other than I like the look of it. But the truth is, I like the look of it. I think who hasn't looked at a picture of themselves in black and white until they look better? And one of my actresses actually said to me, she was terrified when we had the premiere at the Prince Charles Sci-Fi Festival in London, at the Prince Charles Cinema, on a huge screen in front of 300 people, and she was terrified that it wasn't going to be very flattering. And she thanked me afterwards, because it does, it looks great. But I found when I just gave it that sepia edge, just a little bit of warmth to it seemed to work more with the surrealism of the piece, and it was less cold, and it was very interesting to me that how much more it pleased me anyway. And of course, if you go back into the history of silent cinema, there's a lot of tinting going on in silent cinema in the days. Of course, it's been forgotten now, so we see a lot of silent film, or you catch it on YouTube or buy a DVD, and and what we're forgetting is that when they were released at the time, they would have been colorized, I believe. Giles, you sound like you know about that.
Oh yeah, just I have a familiarity with it. There was a whole lot of playing around with I guess I might, not to sound dismissive here, but primitive forms of colorization. Certainly everything was typically shot in that monochromatic, black and white, and sometimes one of my favorites is there's a very silver tone kind of black and white that wasn't very widely used, but whenever I see it, it's cool to have a shiny black and white cinema. And so there were all kinds of neat the space between full black and white and color. There have been all kinds of things explored in that, which digging back a couple decades now to when I was getting my film degree, but I definitely know what you're talking about, and that they would play around with color before and after the fact, you know, either in the processing or even in the exhibition. There were certain things that could be done to, you know, give it, you know, it was usually just one kind of tone, but it could vary from, you know, shot to shot kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for the effects in the film, you know, that I have manipulated the film in digital ways, and I think if I'd have left it in color, it would have looked slightly cheap. But because the black and white I use, it masks, and because it is uh, sort of referencing black and white B movies and stuff like that, the digital effects become more, hopefully, more hidden within the piece. You know, so you can't tell. But yeah, that's why it's black and white, I suppose, largely.
Oh,
I must. When it came to selling the film, I was maybe I'm quite naive, but you know, we spoke to several distributors who aren't interested because it's color, and they just say, well, the audience sorry, black and white. The audience won't want a black and white film. I was like, well, do these people know about the history of cinema? I mean, it's incredible to me that people won't be willing black and white film.
Yeah, I know that that sentiment's more common than I'd like to be sure. Yeah, but I suppose.
So let's mention where people can see the movie. Do you actually know where people can see the movie? It's on all sorts of streaming platforms.
Yeah, it's in the USA and Canada, where I'm assuming most of your audience are. You can watch it on most of them. I think it's on Apple. It's on YouTube. You know, you have to pay for it, but it's on YouTube, and it's on Vudu.
Mhm.
Is that one?
Yep.
That's
Voodoo, yes.
okay. Or you could use Vudu to try and conjure up the film and then watch it perhaps on the back of someone's head. I don't know. Yeah.
All right.
What else? Oh, there's a library. There's a library service it's on called Hoopla.
Hoopla. Yeah.
I was so pleased because I'm such a supporter of libraries. When I was told that it's on Hoopla and you can watch it in a library, that did give me a little thrill. So yeah.
And then one final question, which Giles will ask, and we got about a minute to answer it, so you'll have to go quick. But go ahead.
We like to close. You know, we like to close off every interview we do with a double-barreled question. What's your hometown, and can you recommend a restaurant there?
Yes, I can. I'm in London. It's a small village in the south of England, and the restaurant I would recognise is Homie's on Donkeys. It's a Mexican restaurant very close to where I live in East London. It's too hot though. My wife thinks it's okay, but I think it's far too spicy, and you end up drinking far too much. And that, I believe, is the end of our interview. Gentlemen, I have really enjoyed myself.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I'm always going to drink with interviews from now on.
From now on, yeah. Great. We go by fast.
Thanks so much.
Keith John Adams.
Yeah, and I love your website.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me.
We're tuning out. See everybody next week. Thank you so much, Keith.
So long, guys.